A new season means new opportunities, new chances for drivers to pounce for spots and for points. Today, the top drivers on the Le Mans Ultimate platform fly out to the home for British motor racing, Silverstone, for the start of its Simu Nation LMGT3 Masters, powered by NOX Gaming and brought to you by Wolf Sim Racing. Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Prince. Alongside me in the booth for today is Mike Noss. Our producer this evening is Agur Bakshi. As mentioned, Simu Nation ready to bring racing forward here today as we are set to see how things play out. With many partners involved, including NOX Gaming, who's looking to power your PCs for this type of racing, and Wolf Sim Racing, like they call them, for their support here for this season. Getting set to go for tonight for the opening round of this campaign, Mike. 8 rounds over the course of the next couple of months here on LMU. And we have a variety of different racetracks to conquer. It's going to be a fun season as these drivers look to start off with a bang.
It's a deep calendar here, Justin, and not to mention the fact that there are also prizes on the line all the way down to the very end. They'll be battling it out, you can see, as we just saw on screen. Starting us off here in Silverstone, out in the lovely British Midlands. Then we head on off, of course, to Monza over in Italy, and then we head to the France homeland itself for Paul Ricard. More calendar after that, of course, Justin, but my goodness, you can see here the track ahead of us here today. These drivers, they have a lot to tackle.
Absolutely, especially when you consider with this racetrack in general, there's a lot of opportunities to pass, but it's going to be ever-flowing when it comes to Silverstone. So many chances to pounce, especially that run up of Megas and Beckett's and Chapel up the Hater Straight. A lot of opportunities to build up slipstream there. And plenty of these competitors, as mentioned, going to be battling for prizes throughout this entire campaign. First place for the championship gets $250 in NOX Gaming gift cards. $125 for second, and a pair of NOX Gaming Sim Racing gloves go to third place as well. All drivers that compete in 6 of the races get put into a draw to win some t-shirts. Also keep in mind, Wolf Sim Racing providing ultimate trophies for the top 3 podium finishers, a chance to take home some physical hardware.
Who doesn't want an actual trophy at the end of this? This is really what the drivers, I think, are going to be battling for. Yes, of course, the $250 NOX gift card is great and all, but you get to take home a physical representation. What more bragging rights could you possibly want? And as you said here, starting off, Justin, on Silverstone, this is going to be a track where drivers are going to have to display both patience and aggression. It's a track that really rewards aggression early on, but of course, cook the tires late on. That could potentially cost you. We are expecting 1 pit stop throughout the entirety of this session. We're not entirely sure when. We'll figure it out as we roll here. But Justin, I have to say again, this track, founded all the way back in 1948, the first ever Formula One race, and now on top of it, debuting the first ever community based out of Montreal, of course, and that is going to be Simu Nation. So it's the first race that they're running here under the new brand, and I cannot be more excited to see these drivers out on track.
Speaking of the track, let's talk about that more in depth. You mentioned some of the details, but we have a track guide available brought to you by Wolf Sim Racing for today. Let's take a look at how this track looks. Talk us through the lap here, Mike, as you see how these drivers will approach the circuit.
We're starting us off here, of course, a very fast right-hander into a bit of a backwards circuit. If you watch Formula One, you're maybe used to them going into the next farm and village sector. No, we're into Maggots and Beckett's right away. Lots of left-handers, lots of right-handers, all about maintaining that maximum minimum speed throughout the corners. Onto the hammer as early as you possibly can, down the hanger straight, and on the run to Stowe. This is where we're going to see a bulk of the overtaking happening. You get a good run, use the slipstream, dive down to the inside. Plenty of track you can see on the inside, plenty of track on the out. Run to the inside, though, on a hot lap. Use all of the track you paid for it. You might as well use it. Now, coming into the Bell Chicane, very tight, twisty. You've been traveling so fast for so long. Hit the curb on the left, hit the curb on the right, accelerate out wide, and cut back now to what you normally would be called the Formula One straight, now, of course, dubbed the Lewis Hamilton straight. And we're not done yet. This is a long lap, 3.6 miles, 5.8 kilometers. Another right-hander coming up through Cops and now, or excuse me, through club and Abby down into farm and the village sector coming up now. This is where, again, we're going to see a lot of setup opportunities happening for the next long straight where you're going to be able to let the hammer down and run it out wide here. Get onto it early, third, fourth gear, climbing up all the way to fifth. Going to be running this car pretty much up to top speed, not as long as the hangar straight here, but coming into one of the most famous corner complexes in the world, into Brooklands, through to Luffield Sweep, hitting every single curve you can here, running it a little bit wide, tighten that apex back up onto the accelerator through Woodcut Sweep, and one curve left to go. Take it to the inside for the hot lap, and then back across the line, and that is going to be 3.6 miles or 5.8 kilometers here of Silverstone.
Pretty smooth lap, brought to you once again by Wolf Sim Racing. Great looks around the facility, to say the very least. But again, Silverstone going to be one of the races where you want to start off well, to say the very least. As we take a look at the official track info in terms of the specs, remember the rounds 1948, 3.66 miles. That's almost 6 kilometers, mind you. They've raced here for a long time with a lot of different configurations. This configuration spurting around in recent years, Mike. These drivers are ready to roll pretty soon, though, for what's going to be a 75-minute race.
In, of course, the LMGT3 classes as well, and we're going to be seeing them get to it very, very shortly. 18 corners on this track, as we just mentioned, 8 to the left, 10 to the right. Very even when it comes to tire wear as well. So we're not going to be seeing one side necessarily bleed over. There's plenty of straights to cool down the brakes, to cool down the tires. This, Justin, I think is going to be a race of aggression. And as I said earlier, again, a race of patience. It's going to really reward those that get the hammer down early, but also those that have a good qualifying. We haven't talked too much about that yet, but of course we still have a qualifying ahead of us.
Yes, they'll have 20 minutes in the qualifying session coming up here for these drivers to be able to set the fast lap times. Qualifying is just getting underway right now, in fact. So some opportunities to catch up with drivers and be able to see what they look like on the circuit here today. Mike, qualifying so critical if you want to do well in terms of making sure you have the good track position in the first place.
It is, absolutely, but this isn't necessarily going to be as critical as a qualifying as maybe your Codas later on down the line, or necessarily your Imolas even, I would say, probably being one of the more important ones on this calendar. And of course, Sebring as well. Difficult to overtake, but qualifying going to be quite important. Here, the drivers, again, you have a little bit of room to overtake. There's going to be some momentum. We're going to see position changes. That's not going to be a question. Even in the top three, I would imagine we're going to see some shuffling, some slipstreaming, some working together potentially. I know that's always wishful thinking when it comes to a grid full of drivers.
So drivers currently getting underway for the qualifying session here. As we take a look at one of your competitors zipping around. This is Jonathan Desermo, who's trying to build speed up in the Porsche. So when it comes to the manufacturer side of things, you'll see a few different manufacturers on the pylon here once again. How would you describe the balance of, say, a Porsche compared to, say, the BMW? What manufacturer do you feel gets the preference at Silverstone and why?
It seems, just looking at the grid and from what I've talked to a couple of the drivers, the Porsche is looking like the more dominant car, but as we can see in shot right now, we have multiple manufacturers and multiple countries representing, so the balance seems to be fairly even throughout the LMGT3 field, and of course with the varying skill levels being this a community race as well, that'll also play a role into it. Now, myself, Justin, I've never been a Porsche guy. I'll just be the first one to admit it. The rear engine has always been a little bit too much for me. I'm more of a mid-engine guy myself. And yes, the Porsche 992, basically mid-engine. Okay, chat. Either way, the BMW, very well planted. And actually, in terms of the LMU cars that I have been driving myself, the Ford Mustang and the BMW, they seem to be more reasonable for the newcomers like myself in the game.
Well, a little bit of tire games, a little bit there. It was a bit of a check up at the heart of the corner, but we'll say the reason partly to be looking at the Porsches just so happens that Simu Nation is starting a sprint series with the Porsche Cup powered by NOX Gaming as well. That's going to be an iRacing series that's next week for its beginning. Looking to try and draw interest and be able to track competitors for the start of that season, as the Porsches will get a chance to zip around the racetrack. The driver that we did get the chance to look at for your onboard was this one. This is one of the drivers to keep an eye on, Xavier Chamberlain. Chamberlain is one of the top drivers as well in EGT Canada competition, finished second in December for that series. But now, started things off with top of the board in practice. Going to be very tough to beat him, potentially one of your fast drivers, at least to start off the night, as you see him try and set some first lap times up.
Yeah, solid banker lap here so far, as we can see the sector times rolling on in. We'll see as we get to the line what we see. We're going to be seeing laps around that 2-minute time, probably plus it, of course, here in the LMGT3s. But some very competitive drivers out there. We also see Chris Larson currently running in second, De La Fonte down in third right now, but there's not to mention the strength throughout Laporte as well. And just to break the fourth wall here briefly before we have these drivers setting qualifying laps, we do apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. We're doing our absolute best. We did practice beforehand. Practice only goes so far, so now's the execution time. But a big thank you to everyone joining us as well over on the Simu Nation channel. If you are enjoying this, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, as it does help out a lot. I see we got lots of fine chatters over there, and we welcome each and every one of you. But here we go, Justin, the first lap coming on in.
See what the times fall to start. 158 right on the money, in fact. So a good begin, up by a tenth over Larson, who was looking pretty good in practice as well. 2 seconds back for De La Fontaine as others zip by on the board. A few of these drivers, I think, just trying to build up some heat into the tires before they push here. But for Christopher Larson, his Ferrari has been working well on its own for much of the session so far. We were keeping an eye on him. He's one of the gold standard drivers, actually, to the SimGrid side. Also is in our EGT Canada competitor for those who follow along with that series. In December, actually won in the Le Mans Challenge, a part of that championship in a hypercar. So, in our words, a very fast driver as well to compete for the race lead today.
And a jack of all trades. Could he potentially, though, is he going to show that he's a master of this Cavallina Rampanti out on track? Probably will be pretty dominant here at Silverstone. It's great in the top speeds, and that's where this thing is going to shine. A lot of top speed to be had at this track, and Larson only a tenth off the time right now, showing that Chamberlain is potentially bulletproof. We'll see as he goes, or not bulletproof, I should say, as we go on through. But mentioning as well the LMGT3s, you brought up the cold tire conversation, and these cars, they take a couple laps. It's a bit of a process. There's no tire blankets to be found on them, and so you're going out on cold rubber, having to get all the heat through it, and it takes a good 2-3 laps before we start to see some very competitive laps being set.
Absolutely. So it takes a lot of rhythm, and the big thing is, too, compared to some other series where you may have a fixed setup, this is open, where it's also going to be about not just how well you can drive the lap and time up the tire temps, but also how well you can balance up the downforce levels and your setup for these cars to be able to maximize time here. Let's see where this time falls for Larson. 158.8. That's top of the board, in fact. Top of the board for over Chamberlain and Lapontier in terms of that run through. As we take a look, though, will there be a swap back? Target time you see in the bottom corner, it's still a tenth back.
That's interesting. I suspected they were going to get faster every lap here as we go for about the first 2 or 3 laps, as I was saying. Then we're going to start to see the drivers get more and more even as those tires do rubber in there. The track starts to rubber in, the tires get up to temperature, and we start to see everyone get more even. A Lamborghini out on track there as well. I feel like that's a little bit of a manufacturer I haven't seen too much of out here, and a brilliant livery to boot. Lots of different fields, lots of different cars out there. Justin, what's your favorite on the LMGT3 grid?
That's actually an interesting question. I haven't thought about that, but usually for those who have the context on the sim side and more on the iRacing side, but the McLaren in recent years has had a resurgence in that sim because for years people avoided that car, but in recent years with the recent updates that have been going on with the builds since the Spa 24 in that side of the sims, people have gravitated towards driving McLaren more and more on the platform because the BOP was that much more better for that side, where it was able to pick up on the straight line speed of the cornerings compared to being one of the oldest cars originally on that platform. So the McLaren.
That's a smart choice. I like it. I'm using a little less logic in my decision, and I like the sound of the Ford Mustang. It's very nice. That's going to be my personal pick. It does sound extremely good. I don't know if our producer Sagar Bakshi can pull up maybe a little sound of one of those Fords. I see we have Messonave out on track, who's going to be driving in the Ford, and maybe a couple others as well. We can see a little bit of that big old 5.4 liter Coyote engine. American, no, it's German made. It's not American made, but it's basically a German car. It's still cool though.
Take a look at some of the Aston Martins. You see the Heart of Racing livery on. That is actually a team that we've seen in a lot of different series across the globe, including some SRO competition that popped up. Usually pretty sporty in that side, on the US side at the very least, but Amel trying to find a way to pick up an extra couple seconds here. A lot of drivers here, 2 to 3, 4 seconds off to begin things though. Does that set the tone for what you would expect to see in the qualifying? Or do you see things tightening up here in a fair bit? Keep in mind, a lot of drivers don't have a drafting partner per se for the straight line.
One of the things, that being a great point as well. Now, I don't suspect the draft being able to make up 1.5 seconds necessarily. However, it could take out a good half second there. I think what we're seeing, of course, as well is just the fact that this is a community. There are different skill levels out there, and we are seeing sort of brackets starting to form. But this is only race 1 of 8. I think 8 on the calendar. Plenty of opportunities left to go. And this could just be Larson and Chamberlain's track. With that being said, I predicted times around the 2 minutes. These are not quite alien pace, but this is pretty close to as perfect pace as you can get around Silverstone of the 158.8. That is nearing, the optimum time, so we'll just put it that way. So the rest of the drivers, I would say, within human capability.
Yeah, here is someone to keep an eye on a little bit. He had said before today's race, he expected to be P1 from the rear side. This is going to be Frank Gortex, who actually works as a community moderator for one of the French Twitch streamers, or sim racing streamers, should say, on that side. So far, not bad at all for his McLaren, holding on to the 12th spot. You can see, though, with the sectors, need to pick up a little bit more ground. Originally, it's 10 seconds off in the opening sector, I believe, was just trying to get set up again, and instead, he'll reset.
Going to need to find, I think he is first of the McLarens as of right now, so we can at least give him that title to make him feel somewhat better. But I'm sure he's got a little bit more time left in him. 9 minutes left in quali, and a spinner that we have there, Corvette round. And the BMW of Martoni is going to lose his slipstream partner. Probably wanted that, but is just going to have to plug on and continue here. Currently rocking in 11th position. Whoa, a little bit deep, and that's going to be most certainly an invalid lap, and he's going to have to go and re-rack him, restack him, and try again.
Yeah, and you see that reset there. The reason they do that, in theory, though, is, correct me if I'm wrong here, there's only the couple laps, and obviously you want to be able to reset, try and get those tire temps back into the right position. It's the real-world approach. Or you reset, try and go back out there, try and push again.
I would have thought they would have stayed out, to be honest. Now, I'm not sure how much running they've done on those tires, but it takes 2-3 laps to get up to temp, and here at Silverstone, it's a 2-minute lap. It's going to leave you with, realistically speaking, 1 good flyer, 2 good flying laps, and you've already put the work in to get the tires up. They're not really going to be that worn. These cars, tires are not normally the issue. They're going to run out of fuel first when it comes to the wear in terms of the race pace itself. So we're going to not really be seeing too many tire issues. It wouldn't even be surprised if they didn't take tires here at Silverstone. This isn't the most abrasive track. It doesn't have the widest aggregate. It doesn't have the most balance. I don't know. It's an interesting decision, Justin.
Yeah, a little bit, but you see one of the Fords. We were talking about him just moments ago. Right now, we'll see how things play out, in particular for the Fords. You love the sound of this car. I think you're getting your wish here to get a chance to look at it.
It is a large, intimidating beast. When you're driving in a Corvette and you see that thing approach in your rearview mirror, it's basically like an F-150 approaching a Prius. It's not comparable in size. This thing is a monster, but it's fun. It's very well planted. It's got a lot of horsepower, so when you're in the low speeds, it's a little bit twitchy. But once you get it up to speed, it is a brick. It stays planted to the ground because, you know, who needs downforce? It's just got weight. Yes, it has downforce, of course. I'm only kidding. But to not be kidding, Philip here, he's made some great improvements in qualifying, and I want to talk on that here briefly because we saw Laporte just on the last lap here. He's been chipping away, was 1.5 seconds off, then was 1 second off. Now he's only half second down, so Laporte has entered the conversation and started to find their groove and rhythm.
Yeah, you see last time through Sector 1, though, was 4/10 off the mark. Needs to pick it up a fair bit in Sectors 2 and 3 to be able to hit that target time here. Only less than 7 minutes to go. That gives maybe time for 3-4-ish laps, give or take, realistically speaking here. So Laporte has to find a way to push as much as possible. Let's see where this time goes. Just running slow ups. Well, we'll say, you can see this is where the difference is. On some sims, you have the front straightaway where it is the Hamilton straight. Obviously today, that scoring loop is with the old layout. That's the big difference here. That may catch some of those watching along off.
Yeah, certainly. I wanted to point out as well here, I was just taking a look at the manufacturer. We have 8 different manufacturers in the top 10. So it's talking about that conversation that you brought up earlier, Justin, in terms of what car do we expect the advantage out of? Well, I'd almost go as far as saying absolutely none of them, because right now we're seeing a couple Ferraris and a couple Fords, but other than that, it's all going to be single manufacturer brands throughout that, and seeing it is great. That means the balance, again, of this game doing very well. Of course, I know LMU been the platform of choice for a lot of drivers recently, and so seeing it get more developed, get more drivers out there is awesome, and seeing such a populated league here as well. Over 30 drivers here tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot of community members when it comes to this side of things, especially when you talk about the Quebec side of sim racing. We were talking a little bit with some of the admins earlier on this afternoon and this evening, where you're talking about several leagues that have upwards of 200 committed members that race out of Quebec. We mentioned EGT, that's a fixed side. Of course, this series and this with Simu Nation focusing more on the open side has a lot of races they've held under their previous branding. It's a very diverse and a very committed community, to say the very least, for these competitors to be able to go out and race against people they're familiar with on this platform and develop their mindsets and skill sets here.
Yeah, and on top of it, develop brands as well as, of course, our title sponsor, NOX, as well as Wolf Sim Racing there. I think both of them out of the Quebec-Montreal area, so that is, of course, just going to show you how, I guess, developed it is over there. They said it was small, but no, come on. It seems like it is quite the scene, and I love to see it developing as well throughout all of North America. So that is the goal here. So if you are looking to get involved, of course, head down in the description. The Discord link will be there, and you can find an awesome community of a bunch of like-minded individuals that, guess what they just want to do? They just want to race.
Well, Donovan Bailey, we've been keeping an eye on over this lap, by the way, currently 8th. Bailey, right now, 2.4 seconds off the pole, as you can see with the mark, counts as an outlap. A lot of drivers, as we said, been back and forth for tires or for adjustments to see if they can find extra speed. Here comes the flyer, though, and has the opportunity to get a little bit of pull off of Larson we were touching upon. We'll see how this helps the Porsche. You can see with how Bailey is approaching this, trying to find a way to dig and match up this line, which is easier said than done, because a little bit of aero factor can come in, and you can see how much he's pushing wide this time, running up through Beckett's and Chapel.
I think that's a little bit of a dog chasing the bone, and unfortunately the bone got too far away there. He tried to do what the car ahead did and couldn't quite manage it. I've been there, Donovan. I know what it's like. Great lap, though, so far, at least before that. You can see, again, I mentioned the packs they start to form right now. We kind of have our top 3 in their little pack, and then beyond that, we have 4th till Richard in about 7th position, and then from 8th downwards, it's a very tight field. So kind of Richard there being the lead, or excuse me, Bailey being the lead of that pack, and needing to find over half a second to close down and find another position there. It's a tall order, and especially on a track like this, you make one little mistake, Justin, and it just feels like an eternity getting back around the circuit. You know you're not going to improve, and you just have to get to the line and try again.
Exactly. Only a couple minutes to be able to get that in hand, but look at how good this is looking for Larson. With the purple sector in Sector 1, a little bit off in Sector 2, but is still on track to get a pole time built up here. The Ferrari's got a good amount of heft down the straightaways, and we're seeing that with the pickup, with how he's handling things. Will this time stick is the huge question. Coming out from left field to Woodcote. Keep an eye on the time in the 154s, 155s. Up to the line, taking a shortcut to the inside. It's purple. 158.677, and Larson immediately parks as he is happy with it.
500 thousandths separating those two drivers, and Chamberlain will have an opportunity to crack back, but my goodness, he needs to find a couple millimeters shorter on this lap rather than Larson. I mean, the differences that we're talking here, for anyone that's curious, the blink of an eye is 0.2, that's 0.2 of a second. 0.005 is nearly unfathomable on how small of a time margin that actually is.
Yep, both of the top 2 are in pit lane already, so if anybody else wants to disrupt things, they better find a way to pick up a fair amount of time here. So here's Laporte. Right now, it's not looking good for the pickup, though. We've seen him go back and forth down the pit lane a couple times over. Everyone else is within about a second to 2 seconds back. A decent spread amongst the top 20, you could argue. However, with less than a minute to go, there's not a lot of time left. Look at this, though. Got his best lap, but it was a 159.7. Still 7/10 off.
Yeah, a lot to ask for Laportier. He's sort of found his own little bubble, though. 2/10 ahead now of 4th position, so with a good little gap. But once we get to the race, qualifying doesn't mean that much anymore. It just tells you what position you're starting in, and then you start from scratch, back to the drawing board, and whatever you do is going to be the outcome. So now Laportier looks to be pulling it over to the sideline, says enough is enough. I am not going to be improving on this one, certainly not 7/10. Now, are we going to see Ward from behind? Lafonte, who's found quite a lot of time so far, but has plateaued in this qualifying. Bailey also gained a good amount of time, but not yet breaching into the margins of Richard. So who is it going to be? Are we going to see a cat amongst the pigeons, or is this how the order is going to fall?
Well, it sounds like this is it. Qualifying's concluded. Here goes Longue up into the gravel trap. Everyone's immediately parking it. So this is about it for qualifying. Aschenbrenner looking to at least keep it on the racetrack, it looks like. But just about everyone has finished out the session. Your thoughts on the qualifying here, Mike, as we follow along with the last of the drivers to see what they do.
Like I say, a bit of pack racing. We have our top 2 firmly secured, separated by nearly a hair margin. Then we have the group behind that forming till about 8th position or 7th position, and then 8th backwards. So I sense that once we get into this race, we're going to start to see groups forming, and then in those groups, they're going to be absolute melees.
Take a look at the last drivers. Perret, for example, 27. Not getting enough increase, but is setting purple, pink, rather green. Let's go with Sarthe, in fact, if we're talking all colors in terms of the marker points. You can see there is some improvement here to end things off, but with the runoff, we'll see where they actually grid up here. 27th, a long way to come back from for the very back of the field. Where will it be this time? 2:02.3, that is a personal best. Decent pickup, actually, I believe, to 19th.
Not a bad result there, and that is going to do it for their qualifying parade in, I think, with just 2 more drivers left out on track. We're going to see this session changeover very shortly. And then we head again to the new variable, the race. And of course, Justin, with this being the first race of the season, you don't necessarily know who's alongside you. We're going to have to see a lot of discretion here early on. Get the feel for who's around you, get the feel for the pack. Don't necessarily take an opportunity that's going to risk anything. I would say just play it safe here and just try to stay awake to stay alive.
Looks like things transitioning as drivers won't get the chance to adjust. Let's take a look at this starting order for today's race. Here on VSpeed, Christopher Larson gets the pole today over Chamberlain. Then it's Laporte alongside the competitive Desaulneau in the top 4. Steve Ward quietly got a top 5. Then it's De La Fontaine, who will start in the 6th position. 7th today goes to Francois Richard. Then it's Donovan Bailey, who holds on to 8th in the 397. Then it's Cedric Chartier, who will start in 9th, and Andre Moreau, your top 10.
On to row 6, Zach Wolf bringing up 11th position with Felipe Massanov in P12. Row 7 belonging to Marc-Andre Hamel, and then, of course, Martoni down in 14th. 15th belonging to Rick Gonsalves, Frank Cortex in P16 in the McLaren. The Porsche of Nicholas Leroy bringing up 17th with Alexandre Schroner in P18. 19th in row 10 belonging to Guillermo Perret and Mitchell Carroll to round out your top 20.
21st goes to Benoit Rousseau. Then behind them is Arbet. Shane Youngblood alongside P.A. Longue will be down in 24th position. Then you scroll to 25th is Brandon Cumberford alongside Mason Aschenbrenner, one of the last drivers for qualifying we've seen. Then it's J.F. Nalay, who will start alongside John Benecke in that spot, 28th. David Pittman and J.F. Tremblay will be a part of your top 30 as we continue through.
31 belonging to Christian Corner, 32nd to William Felipe in the Porsche, row 17 to Kevin Godden, 433rd, 34th belonging to Jacob Hines. Getting down to the doldrums here, we have Edgar bringing up the backs, last but certainly not least in the Corvette.
Look top to bottom of the running order here today here on VSpeed as we get all set to go. Mike, what are your keys to victory, especially since we know there's going to be 75 minutes on that clock?
Discretion. It's really going to come down to discretion, and I think the first pit stop, or well, the only pit stop, hopefully, for the drivers. So who is going to capitalize? Are we going to be seeing the undercut favoring the overcut? That we're not sure yet. It is Silverstone, so I'm not sure it's going to play the biggest difference, but I'm looking at pit, and I'm looking at the start here. Who is going to get off to the better go, and who's going to be able to look more dominant at the start here? Because I think, again, not knowing the field around you, it's just going to come down to looking intimidating, potentially.
We'll see who's the most intimidating. Out of the drivers here, who do you think gets it done very quickly?
Larson, well, I mean, to be fair, we're throwing a hair straw between the two of them. I honestly have no idea. Larson has the advantage on the inside. I think that's the only thing I could throw to him.
Will he be able to throw his way ahead of a few car lengths here once we get the green flag? Make their way up the old pit straight. All set to go, engines are revving, we're underway as we make our way to Copse. Already, the battle is on for the race lead. The Ferrari holds on to the inside, Larson holds off Chamberlain falls back in the line as much of the field already single file some 2x2 about 7th on back.
See, though, Laporte under pressure a little bit heading into Maggots and Beckett's. You don't really want to be making moves in. You want to be getting the momentum and capitalizing on the out. The Porsche, though, of Chamberlain falling back 4/10 already at the start here. That should get reeled in fairly quickly due to the slipstream. This is where we're going to start to see the filing, though. This is where, if there is going to be carnage, it's going to be down into Stowe.
Especially with some of the argy-bargiest that can come out absolutely at this part of the track. Already seen Shard getting a little bit aggressive. Nothing doing though on the defense. Somebody spun down in the 20s. The rest of the field has kept it clean, as a few drivers believe. Have not got it going. You've seen a lot of people marked on pit road. Everybody else get the elbows out 3 wide. Youngblood amongst those in 20th that are trying to fight with a lot of aggression here. A little bit uber aggressive off the jump.
Ooh, and a big hip check there for the Lamborghini in the background. The Porsche really hanging on here, and we see Shane just trying to keep an eye ahead of the road. Don't worry about what's behind you because it is absolutely chaos. Everybody, though, somewhat, or should I say somewhat, it's very planted at the start here. Side by side down into the village sector now as Pare is going to be trying to capitalize down to the inside, gain the momentum on the out. Are we going to be able to see the slingshot? It looks like we don't even need to. The job is done before the corner exit.
Yeah, Pare, you see right now, once those we've seen with the big pickup in qualifying, looking for the setup to the inside. The problem is, though, it takes a lot of overlap to get some of these moves done. You see, for example, though, if you allow the overlap, it seems in Brooklyn's, you get the chance by left field to get the pass. And in that case, able to cover it off was your 20th place 52 machine to make sure there wasn't a poke and see.
It's all about just trying to keep it going for right now. This looks like a sprint race, folks, but keep it in mind, we have 75 minutes on the clock. There's going to be plenty of passing opportunities and spinning opportunities as well. As in the background there, we saw McLaren off. We'll have to find a replay of that very shortly.
And we'll take a look and see what's going to happen there involving that Mitchell Carroll. You see, though, try to stay focused, 17th spot. Keep in mind, a lot of these drivers on the interval have already lost a few seconds in the choo-choo train, but this choo-choo train effect is also common here, where eventually these groups, in theory here, will splinter off into a couple different packs. When they splinter off these couple different packs here, that's when this field is going to get much harder to be able to get forward and make their way forward. Hence why there was the discussion, at least in my part, for that track position. You want to keep close to the leaders before things start to splinter.
Yeah, and that, yes, stay in the slipstream for as long as you possibly can. Now, we didn't necessarily expect Laporte with the pace from qualifying to transition that over into the race, so it wasn't unexpected for them to fall back. What does surprise me, though, is DeSormo, who's behind, kind of falling off by 0.6, or by about, 0.3, excuse me. We're looking at the leader's pace, I think. So gaps starting to form, as you say there, Justin. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than expected at this stage, but this is endurance racing. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch. There was a move done there for 9th position as we saw Maroney there move up ahead of Wolf.
Yeah, one of the BMWs for CRT you see in the lineup. And look out in the middle of the racetrack, Donovan Bailey. That's a bad rejoin right into the racing line. Then punches it into the heart of the field. 3-4 cars slam on in. Donovan Bailey still stuck in the middle of the circuit. Hit a lot of different cars and almost hit another one.
Oh my goodness, you need to keep your head on a swivel at all times. Donovan Bailey going to be rejoining the number 4 car here, causing a bit of chaos. We'll catch a replay of that one very shortly as well here as we try to pull that up. But my goodness, drama's, I would say early, but drama's more mid into this race as now we have it.
Yeah, only a couple minutes in. You're talking 5 minutes in and already attrition building up. Pare, since the last time we checked it, with that chaos actually moved up to 14th. That's how big the dodge was to get around Carroll, who took one of the first shots there from the Porsche. So Pare able to really take advantage. The downside is, see that distance that's built up here between the packs. So what does Pare do to close it up now?
Yeah, exactly. Now we do have a little shot of that replay, and Bailey here, we'll see how it all started, as it unfortunately was a little bit of a trip that led to an absolute calamity here. And again, we'll be pulling that up very, very shortly. But as we get into it here, rolling up, we're going to see the Porsche on our screen here, heading into, well, just a casual left-hand corner, nothing to be seen, loses the back end. Classic Porsche things. And sir, you cannot park there, but you certainly cannot accelerate there. Hold your brakes, hold your brakes. We didn't hold our brakes. And now the dominoes start to unfold. Well, again, that's gonna be just about it, nearly taking out the 18, but rejoining safely. And, well, we saw, of course, on the rejoin as well, nearly taking out the 737. So a bad day at the office for Bailey here as we started on from 9th to 27th in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, that was an absolutely sketchy bit of rejoin there. But the top two, as you alluded to, 2.8 seconds. As some in the community have already noted, Should be surprised to see these two battling with what they've done. We talked about and alluded to some of their experience in various series. You also talked about this community as well in Simu Nation competition. They've done well no matter the car, whether it's, say, MX5 Wednesdays that's appeared in recent weeks, where they've ran top 5 or top 3 most of the time, or in the previous branding of this series. These top 2 are very quick drivers. You have a lot of people like Leroy cutting their way on through the pack, who was a question mark for technical issues coming in, but the top 2 itself are showing the gauntlet here with how big the gap is built up between the two of them. Going to be a cat and mouse game.
Yes, it is, and I don't really suspect the cat and mouse game to start just yet. I think for right now, Larson and Chamberlain, they know for a fact that they have enough pace to just secure themselves at the front of this pack. Get a solid 10-second lead, get a solid 15-second lead, and then start worrying about each other. There's really no sense in starting the battle right now, because that could potentially cause a little bit of a contact. They get reeled in by Laportier, and now you have a 3-car battle, and now we're losing even more time, which is not at all what they want. So I think Chamberlain, he is going to have his head firmly planted on his shoulders and just keep driving right now. Stay behind Larson, stay in the slipstream, lift and coast a little bit as well. That'll save some fuel. Shouldn't really make the difference at the end of the day. There is going to be one mandatory pit stop no matter what. There's no way they're going to save enough fuel or virtual energy to make it to the end, but it will give him maybe just that little extra tire edge potentially, and say, well, maybe when I come into pit lane, I don't take a fresh set of boots. You can see there Larson twitching around a little bit. That might make the difference at the end. Well, he's really twitching.
Yeah, a lot of twitchiness. Normally you don't see that per se, but was able to hold on, actually forced an off track in that situation as well for the checkup. But the main thought, at least to me, if it does come down to strategy here, is the short fuel opportunities. Because if you do have the lift and coast here, you might be able to save a little extra bit of time in the box by an extra couple tenths because of that ability to save a little bit and allow that toe to drag you instead, in theory. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Now, in theory, I love this is a 75-minute race. I don't know if it's going to make the difference, but I do love talking about this sort of stuff. Chamberlain here, he is just going to be thinking right now, again, drive. Just keep ahead and keep an eye on the prize right now. And at the end of the day, this is also race 1 in a championship. So really, you don't want to go for a move that's going to cost you too many points. You might just settle for second. I say that, and I don't think that's really the racing driver mentality. But you never know. We'll see. Chamberlain, this is the first time we've seen him out on track here in this series, so we'll see how he plays.
Well, we'll say this for those curious on how the point scaling works. Per the SimGrid side of things, which helps sort the league side when it comes to LMU racing, 85 points gets from the win on the points tally. Second gets 76, then goes to 68, then 61, then 55. Goes basically down by 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. Then it goes down by a couple points apiece once you get to the teams. So quite simply, the more further back you are, the bigger the deficit you can build up here. But the lead and the win, definitely very helpful for those tallies. We'll just say that here. By the way, 27 cars are still running on the racetrack. A few drivers, as said, did not get going initially, and at least one did get listed, 2 in fact, as DNFs, including Bailey from the crashes. Traffic management eventually is going to be a factor. Some of the drivers are already about 50 seconds back from some of the chaos early, it's worth noting.
And that is going to be a whole variable in itself. Now, traffic normally when we're talking about racing is in multi-class. So you have a much faster car that can drive by a much slower car. And that's normally not too much of an issue. But here tonight, well, everybody is driving the same category of machine. And so when you have to lap somebody, you need to have, well, both people working together. The driver that's being lapped needs to be compliant, and the driver that's doing the lapping has to make sure they're decisive, predictable, and getting it done as quickly as they can. And safely. It's all about safety at the end of the day. That's one thing that this league most certainly prides itself on, and if you are going to be having some naughty incidents, you might find yourself being removed from this league. So that is one, of course, priding themselves on clean racing here at Simu Nation.
Exactly. It's all about the fun. It's all about the clean. When it comes to style racing, you see the 27 machine amongst those trying to sort themselves out here in this battle. And you'll see these groups steady out now. The main thing, at least for some of the drivers too, is looking at some of the experience levels. You're talking about, out of those who submitted information, this is Schroeder, for example, here, is one of the drivers that's built up a fair amount of spots so far in 17th. The experience split that I'm trying to refer to, though, some drivers have been in the sim for only a couple months or less than a year, Mike. In many others, you're talking about some of the drivers who have been around for more than 7 years. In fact, to some of the original Le Mans virtual races that made the headlines around a few years ago when it came to the sim, when Le Mans actually got the exclusive rights to the 24-hour race for these sims way far back around the 2010s. So a lot of drivers have a lot of experience, while others looking to build that and build upon some good performances that they've shown across the platform.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's just take a look at our current first and third position. You know, we were talking about the differences between Larson and Laportier. Larson, over 7 years of experience, like you were saying there. He's been one of the original iRacing Le Mans virtuals. We look at Laportier, only been in it for about 1 to 3 years, so not quite as experienced. Certainly has a couple competitions under their belt and is no slouch by any stretch of the imagination. But this is the difference, right? When it comes to that level of category, we've been in it for that amount of time, you just know a couple more things. And Laportier, with due time, of course, will be there at that level, and very rapidly as well, with the amount of technology, the amount of different simulator helpers that we're having with AI assistants and all sorts of different tech that you can find. Drivers are getting much, much quicker, much, much faster, and on top of it, now I'm not sure how old Laportier is, but at a much younger age as well.
Yeah, you can see that for a lot of drivers as they get better and better. You've been following along with Cumberford in the midst of this discussion, by the way, as we've seen this too. He's now one of the drivers that's looked really good. We take a look at the leaders, though. Once again, now the gap 4.8. Now, you mentioned not expecting too much on the tire degradation side here and all of that, but what would you say would be, for those watching on for the first time, the unique quirks that you'd find with LMU compared to, say, those in iRacing that you wouldn't expect to have to manage with the car? Or is it like an apple to an apple, or a Fuji apple to a, I don't know my apples, any apple?
Granny Smith. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying there. And to be honest, I don't know. I have not had that level of experience in LMU yet. I've only done my fair share of just a little bit of driving, so I'm not sure of all the quirks and differences. However, this is a great question to pose to chat, I would say. So if anyone in chat knows what the differences are, the nuances there between, of course, what I'm more familiar with on the iRacing and ACC side of things to this newer simulator. I say newer. It's been out for almost a year now, and it's still brand new to me. But that just goes to show, like, simulators, they run for a while. iRacing, well, I don't know if we should be saying, but of course running for quite a long time. Other simulators out there have existed for a long while now, and I'm sure LMU just being birthed into it, there's a long future to be had in the tire model. I know constantly changing as well as, I think recently, well, again recently, the past 4 months or so, there was a tire model update as well, no?
Yes, yes, there was. So there was that in the recent times also. So there is some of those that have factored in for some of those in various different sims, absolutely. But for these drivers on this side at the very least, keep in mind LMU at least was kind of a name that popped up a couple of years ago. Didn't get the official release, as you said, until last July, but was an early access title as early as a couple of years ago, February, in terms of how long it's built up the impact. And of course, you have to remember the connections with R-Factor in terms of that side of things, in terms of that platform's development. So there's been a good amount of sense of camaraderie in terms of how this driving model's developed. It's been one of the more well-respected driving models for good measure on the road course side because of how it fares on the racing lines and how it impacts with compared to other sims, you could say. Those nuances people just like to race with, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and not to mention the graphics. That's, I think, one of the biggest glaring factors with LMU that just makes it so striking. And speaking of striking here, it looks like Chamberlain, he's starting to strike while the iron is, well, very lukewarm in my opinion. I wouldn't call it hot just yet. It's been plugged in for about 5 seconds, and he's already trying to press his linens. I don't know about this one, Justin.
Yeah, just trying to provide a little pressure, but there isn't the sense of major urgency quite yet. You'll see this a lot in this type of racing, even a sprint per se, when you know you have a pit stop. There isn't the sense you have to go, go, go. You can just set things up. It's about being able to make sure you give yourself runway, though, eventually, for a response back, in theory, Mike.
You might say it's about what you know. That wasn't that funny. That sounded much better in my head. Either way, Chamberlain, he's got a lot of work ahead of him. He's sticking with him, as we saw from chat. Max here cheering on some Chamberlain. I love to see it. Let us know who you're supporting in the chat. I see we have, is it Albert? Apologies, Albert, probably Albert. Welcome. Cheering on Goncalves. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. And a big warm welcome to everyone in chat that is joining. Like I say, let us know who you're cheering on. Is it Larson? Is it Chamberlain? Is it somebody a little further down? Goncalves, as we saw love for. Gore-Tex in chat earlier. Corner. Who do you want to see maybe find some positions here? Who do you want to see take the victory? Let us know.
Let's check on the back of the field, how things are going for some of these drivers. David Pittman, you're taking a look at, for example, 23rd position. Fair bit of time lost on the racetrack, but for David Pittman Jr., he's one of the experienced bronzes, if you will, as they call it. He runs in a lot of different series. Simulation, Trackulicious, Dad's Go, Sim Racing. In other words, he likes to race a fair bit. Actually, an FTT number 21, part of the simulation ladder back in November, or in this type of car, finished inside the top 5, so he's been able to put together performances in the past in these races. That was a smaller grid, yes, where Chamberlain pulled away and took the win. But he's one of those that has a lot of races built up in recent times in the community, in particular for simulation, for the races it's been holding for a long while now on the platform.
Yeah, and looking to continue that future as well, hopefully. You see, we have a lot of drivers out here. They're out for the love of the game, not necessarily for the prizes in the championships. You mentioned a lot of those communities that you just mentioned, again, putting on plenty of great races as well. We encourage everybody to check out all the communities and all the simulators out there because we love what we do here. And of course, this championship, the Simu Nation LMGT3 Masters, powered by NOX Gaming. Massive shout out to our sponsors, of course, our title sponsor, NOX Gaming, and of course our other sponsors are hardware for Wolf Sim Racing. And again, everybody watching, we thank you all because you guys are what makes it possible. All you guys and gals at home watching us and taking part in our events, we thank you tremendously.
I will say this in terms of the cars, though. Turn the conversation to the circuit itself and the cars. Thoughts on the Corvette here, because some of the the Corvettes towards the back of the field having a rough time, but how would you compare that to, say, the Ferrari or the Porsche that we see for the drivers up front in terms of that BOP effect?
The BOP I can't speak the most on. However, I know for a fact that I cannot drive the Ferrari that well, but I can drive the Corvette okay. What does that say? I don't necessarily know. It tells me that the Ferrari is a little bit twitchier, especially at the low speeds. That's one thing that I really struggled with, trying to get the Ferrari to just hook up in the corners when you're going less than 100 miles an hour, really. It's an absolute pain to turn. It's a brick. The Corvette, seemingly similar, however, not quite. It's a much more punchy out of the corners, in my opinion, but it's more planted, if that makes any sense. I don't know. It seems just more delicate, which doesn't make any sense either because it's a big burly American V8, but they did a good job. The Z06, I'm a pretty massive fan of it, to be completely honest, and seeing it out in these games modeled so well is, again, it's a game. It's not a game. It's a simulator streamer. Yes. But no, it's really nice to see.
It's a lifestyle. That's the viewpoint that people will say. It's life. But in all seriousness, though, in terms of the race car, you'll see, though, for some of the other battles like this one, these small packs we're referring to have indeed gone to a couple packs. It looks like the move taken a little bit. A couple of these drivers taking what you would see a little bit in real life almost here, Mike. Trying to use a little bit of a different line, get some clean air to the nose, maybe. Try to avoid the bumps, you can argue, in some cases that you'll see. Just run something different so you aren't matching line to line and potentially have a bit of contact here.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a really great point in terms of the difference in the car manufacturers as well, is the amount of curbs that they can take. We see the Mustang, for example, can basically gobble up any curb. It does not care. You can mount the curb and it will not even be bothered. The Ferrari, though, I think that's another reason I don't like it, is I do tend to hit curbs a little bit more often than I probably should. The Ferrari is a little delicate princess and just wants to get thrown around anytime it decides to touch the curb. So some cars having to take a little bit more evasive action, having to take a little bit wider line, i.e. the Porsche here that we see as well. That's going to be, of course, one to keep an eye on for losing the back end, you might say. But it's just all about the control and all about that throttle modulation out of the corners. It's so important not to just pin the throttle when the suspension is all upset.
Yeah, those minute differences can really come into play, absolutely, just on that end. It's so critical to know those differences if you want to drive these tracks well and know this. You see that right now with the Aston Martin just refusing to take the curbs right now compared to the Porsche. It's not afraid to take the right side tires, gets set curbing to kind of emphasize that point. We'll say with Leroy, by the way, is the car in front of all this. Good to see him on the racetrack. No, we were talking a touch bit with him before today. It was the question of was he going to be able to run with, because he was getting some technical sides dealt with. But good showing so far. He actually won in his last start in EGT Canada competition. From that side, that was a round 8 event in his Porsche. So in our words, he can also contend for victories on the fixed side.
Yeah, very much so, and we'll see as well as he goes into some of maybe the more technical circuits, might have some more advantages. Silverstone, a bit more of a raw circuit, I would say, and we'll see as he climbs his way through, gets his feel with the other drivers on the grid as well. Of course, that's a factor that I often like to mention because it's such an important factor, is the chemistry of the people around you, knowing who you can overtake and who you can't overtake, who you can quickly, who you can't quickly, so on and so forth. Lots of variables to be found in community racing, and speaking of the community, I see we have our response from all of our chatters. We see some cheers as well for Leroy, so we saw up quite a few different drivers cheering on Leroy. We also have some U8R love, Chamberlain and Laportier and Richard. That's for that team. We also see Hamel, Longue, and Massinov. Some cheers for them, and plenty other more. We see some PE love as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for showing us the support here in chat. Again, if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button here at Simu Nation for more awesome broadcasts and more epic community races like this. And while we're on top of it, hit the link in the description, join the Discord. Justin, we got some battling.
How about some argy-barginess? Schroeder getting the elbows out for the top 15. This is with the 16th place. Aston Martin trying to get the boost, able to get the pull alongside Schroeder, losing a lot of ground as a result of those elbows. That got a little bit argy-bargy there with the run up the Hamilton straight. You have to give some space to Gonçalves. That time, having a lot of elbows out to get that clearance.
A little bit of rubbing and racing. There's nothing wrong with that as long as both cars stay planted on the track and pointing the correct direction. That's all we care about. A little bit of bumping and banging. You know, it's good for the good iron in your diet, I guess. Carbon. It's more carbon, I suppose. Either way. Rick Gonçalves up into 15th now, and the Porsche, is he going to be able to keep up? We'll see. I suspect that Gonçalves is going to find a bit more of an advantage here. Alexander seemingly just clawing along, trying to keep that slipstream as much as he can, but will fall off here. The tenths, they add up into seconds. Justin in seconds, well, that's the difference that we see through some of these positions.
By the way, one of the polls that popped up in the broadcast feed was, will Chamberlain pass Larson? 70% of you said yes. Chamberlain trying to fall behind for now still, so the thought process is later probably yes. But we're still almost towards the midway point nearly, actually. And they're about to reach a couple of lap cars here. They have lapped 1 or 2 already. We'll see how big the traffic management comes into play. A few people were saying they were wondering about how they were going to be pace-wise. They were given the heads up, make sure to follow the blue flags. Blue flag's going to be critical as you see the Porsche having to take the wide angle and try and diamond off the corner this time.
Yeah, I'm not sure to what avail. I think just kind of just trying different things right now, getting the feel if that's going to work later on. There wasn't really any opportunity to open up. I do wonder if when we start approaching back markers, now this looks to just be a lone back marker, so not too much of an issue, but if we do start to approach some serious traffic, will one of these drivers just come into the pit lane, say, you know what, I don't want to deal with any traffic, I'm going to come in and go for my stop now, that way I can just get back out into clean running. That will risk, though, falling back into traffic behind them, but the gaps, I think, are big enough to the point where you'll be able to find something maybe around Gore-Tex or Longo or Parrette. There is some opportunities, but it would be risky, I think, going for this early of a stop. I suspect they're going to leave it till about 30 minutes left in the race.
Now let's take a look. First one we're trying here. You see on the charge, still in 27. See him trying to situate inside the top 5. De La Fontaine trying to hold on. La Fontaine so far. One of the other higher up Ferraris in the field. Being able to march things around the racetrack. But we'll say, you can see just how much they're able to close up as we're talking about. Forsens the outside, defensive maneuvers coming up through Vale, up towards Club. Not wanting to give up the spot whatsoever. A little bit argy-bargy again. But you can see where they're picking their spots here for these Sens, right? In terms of some of these opportunities. Do you push or do you save? And keep in mind, they have a 9-second buffer. You can battle if you want to, Mike.
Yeah, you might as well. Right now for Francois, he just wants to gain time. There's no sense in losing time behind a slower driver, and if you feel that you're faster, then get the job done and get it done decisively. I'm not one of those drivers that goes and sells dummies. I don't think you should be trying to strategically get into the mind of your opponent. No, if you know you're faster, then prove it and go for the overtake, and this is the chance. Down into Woodcut Sweep. Get to the inside, riding the bumper, running on down to the inside, get on the brakes late, and just like that, I would say, a textbook overtake here. If Francois Richard can get it done, the inside is going to be compromised, but that is not going to really be much of an issue. The momentum is in the 27's favor. He drifts wide, though, onto the gravel, and that is going to hand it back to the 33, I think, down to the inside for T1. I don't see any way that Richard gets this done just yet. But the run out of Maggots and Beckett's, I suspect the 333 is going to be in some very much danger.
Yeah, look at this here with the side-by-side still not done. Had to lift to get out of there. You can't go side-by-side through Maggots, Beckett's, and Chapel. So able to sort things out once again, get back in a line. Fontaine holds on for the time being. So as they continue to get scrappy out with this, you can just see the pole build up yet again. Now, as they continue to battle it out here, will there be another chance for some strategy potentially here? Not just in terms of the sending opportunities I'm talking, Mike. Do you elect to roll the dice on pit stops? There's about 50 minutes of fuel, well, in terms of the distance they have. You're talking about still a decent buffer window. Do you take a gamble if you're being held up like this and take a short fuel a little early and then run it out to the end, or do you just run it dry and go from there?
I think you just run it dry and go from there. Whatever the strategy was going into this race, I think the 27 should absolutely stick to. Richard had his plan. You go with it. You just have to get by right now. LaFontaine is just kind of being a bit of a thorn in the side and being a big, real variable for the 27. You can see he's bobbing and weaving every which way like a fighter, but just not really landing any punches that he can find here. So just falling back again. He needs to get it done probably on the hanger straight, down to the inside of Stowe. Don't make that move onto the inside of Maggots and Beckett's. You're just wasting your time. Make a move, make it decisive, and get it done quick here, as LaFontaine is just chilling, and really both of them, I guess, are losing time as a result.
Yeah. Was that a car just in the middle of the grass I just noticed there on the side of your screen? So somebody's taking an excursion up into the grass. It's not for position. That is one of your lappers that's just added into. So it's a lot to consider. Now, let me ask you this in terms of this. The virtual energy, that's something on our platforms that doesn't come up. What is virtual energy in your best of knowledge, and how does it work?
Okay, so It's basically like a secondary fuel tank, all right? That's the best way to think about it. It's a BOP system that basically limits the amount of fuel slash hybrid energy that a car can use per stint. Now, a lot of people often think, okay, well, then that means that these cars have a push to pass. No, not quite. It doesn't quite work like that. The easiest way I think of explaining it is it's a secondary fuel tank. It is another form of fuel that you have in your car, and you have to keep it topped up. You have switches in your car that allow you to use more virtual energy versus more fuel, but at the end of the day, both tanks are going to have to be refueled.
And
does that make any sense?
Yes, that absolutely does. Now,
okay.
How much does that factor for the pit stop delta, in theory?
In a 75-minute race, probably not that much. That's more for the longer endurance races that you're going to be worrying about that, and the hypercars. But, Justin, hold that thought here, because it looks like we got a little bit of scrappiness heading up at the top here. Chamberlain seems to be wanting to get a hurry on, and Larson is becoming a thorn in his side.
Yeah, got a little bit closer than most laps now. Here comes the poke. Chamberlain trying to take the poke alongside, gets back in line, now resets. So there was a thought to go there, switch it up, since we're almost around the midway point just about. But it didn't work out at that exact moment, so Larson holds on for now. But it's pretty clear. Anthony, this is starting to pick up, Mike.
I was one of those drivers that voted yes on the poll. I think Chamberlain absolutely will pass Larson. Everything that I've seen so far is really making me favor Chamberlain. He's showing the right amount of aggression. He's showing the right chances, the right times to be making the move, but he's not really overcommitting. He's not going full send baseball and then dropping it like Aaron Judge did in the World Series. No, he's playing this methodically. There's still 41 minutes left, and he knows that. Maybe force Larson into a mistake, but Larson, he knows Chamberlain at this point. I'm sure they've raced together. You've got to wake up pretty early in the morning to force Larson to make a mistake with some little dummy. And I mean the move, not Chamberlain.
Yes.
Not calling Chamberlain to be clear on that.
I think most people realize that, yes.
Just got to make sure.
Yes. As, by the way, they're still battling for fifth. You see on the swap of the pylon. Chardin de La Fontaine going back and forth again. This time heading up the club of ways back on the order, but they are still getting argy-bargy. Here's the interesting part, though. They lost 2 seconds so far, just about, from all this battling. So they got to be careful here, because there is the chance that Coutelier closes up this gap at the BMW and joins them if they fight for, say, 5-6 more laps in a row.
Yeah, in reality, this is absolutely wasting everybody's time. The 333 should just let the Aston through. Richard is clearly faster, without any question, and LaFonte, with 41 minutes left, do you really think you're going to be defending? Are you really benefiting yourself by defending? These are the questions as a race car driver you have to ask at these mid stages right now, because you're just using more tire wear, you're using more fuel, you're overly defending, you're losing time as well. So the fact that Courtier is now coming into conversation we have to talk about, but the fact that we're not even going to begin to talk about the position for overtaking fourth is not even in this conversation at this point. So if these two want to gain ground, they need to settle their differences and work together. And that would mean letting Richard through, and then the 333 would probably just have to tow along. That is easier said than done when you're in the shoes of the Ferrari. Let's just put it that way.
Under 40 minutes to go on the clock, by the way. And you see that in a couple different spots now on your screen. 40 minutes remaining warning just given out there. You see the red line pop up. So the competitors know we are well inside the window, by the way, on the fuel tank. So as you get situated here, Larson, Chamberlain in the top 2, Laporte in the 3rd spot. Then it is Desermo in the top 4. Then LaFontaine in the top 5 for now. Over Richard, Coutelier, Petroni, Mel, along with Leroy. You also throw in the conversation Mason Nerve, who is just behind in the 11th position. I will give a shout out to one of the drivers that is running a lot better than they are probably expecting here. Gore-Tex is in 12th, by the way. Remember, his expectation was last. He's a lot higher than that right now. So he is doing really well here in his charge. He's picked up a fair amount of spots, I believe.
And if I'm not mistaken, he had a bit of a tumble through the field earlier as well, so he's managed to bounce back and recover quite sprightly. There you go. 4 positions gained as of right now. Longo behind him, 11 positions gained. Really hard charger through the field. Leroy also up, or Leroy, excuse me, up in 7 positions from where he started, up to 10th, so from 17th. 5 positions for Pare, and of course 5 positions for Hamel and Martoni. So seeing some gains here at this stage. Nolet as well, 7 positions. Lots of gains here early on. Where are the drivers that have lost out? Goncalves, unfortunately, is one of the fan favorites out in chat. Have any of these drivers made their pit stop yet, though? Because I suspect that some of them probably have. Only a small handful, actually.
Yeah, 26 is where you go to the first stop. That's Pittman Jr. that made that stop. Curious what's going on with Wolf throughout this race. He's had 3 of them, and you have a lot of people, as said, who didn't exit the pit lane in the first place. So a few drivers have had some issues. Zach Wolf, that's a lot of stops over the course of a race so far. That's put him 27th. So obviously, 4 laps down, it's been a nightmarish time. If you are the 60 car, he appeared in the test race, actually, was the top 7 in that.
Unfortunately, just not his day today. And, well, I guess is first in the amount of pit stops taken. So you could say he's first in our heart. But Zach Wolf, plugging along, staying out on track. That is what I like to see more than anything, is the fact that he's going to be taking the checkered flag in this one, because at the end of the day, when you're league racing, it does not matter where you finish. It just matters if you do. That's really what the entire community wants to see. Come to the line, have the discussion afterwards, and say, you know what, I maybe didn't do the best this time, but I absolutely tried my hardest, and then next time I'm going to do a little bit better. And if I don't, I'll just have to do it the next time.
But I like 3D printed trophies.
Well, yes, I will admit that if you're down in those positions, you might be a little out of luck. However, anything is possible in motorsports, and we will see, of course, by the end of this championship. 8 races to go. Maybe, just maybe, these drivers, for example, down at the bottom, not a British track fan. I think I'm just coping for them at this point, but I'm trying here. We'll see how they do in Italy.
Yes, that's a good point. We look quickly at the schedule early on, and want to quickly mention that with that, because you have Monza part of the schedule, you have Paul Ricard in terms of the layout, you have Sebring, the default one specifically, that's the WEC format, the WEC one. You also have the WEC format for Imola. You throw in Dakota, as you talked about. Spa's a part of the layout. And of course, Le Mans default, you have to go there on the layout. A lot of racetracks and a lot of combinations that these drivers throughout this season, you're mentioning, have to go through. They have to know when to make the dives and let them on go, like this case throughout the season. Youngblood let on through. But there's a lot of opportunities throughout the season for these drivers to catch up with each other in the various variety of tracks.
Yeah, and seeing the, as you said there, the variety, this being one of the more open, wide, very, very traditional racetracks, I would say, and we go over to Monza, which falls into that category. But then next, after that, we head to Paul Ricard, which, yeah, could be considered a traditional racetrack, but I don't necessarily. It's a very different one. It's the only track that I can think of that has 267 plus layouts. And then beyond that, of course, fairly flat in terms of the elevation feel. There's about 100 meters of elevation, actually, but it's all continuous. However, Justin, speaking of the actual race here that we have tonight at Silverstone, pit stops are underway. Looks like we have some drivers entering and exiting the lane now as we speak.
Yes, you see them quickly getting that service done. A couple of them will leave on the jacks even. So our first stop, 17th on down now for those. Cotillier amongst the first to have exited out in that wave so far in the pit sequence. So now it's going to be the matter of when will the others come in? We have second in. Chavalot has come on in from the second position, so the leaders have ducked down, and this is despite the fuel save in theory.
So this is the undercut at play. Chamberlain feeling that that is going to be the optimum strategy. Now here at Silverstone, I've often said, I don't think the undercut versus overcut is the biggest difference. Now Larson more than likely is going to call this strategy. I think he has to. We see Chamberlain is changing tires, so going for a fresh set of boots, tire saving, not going to be any problem if you're just going to change tires anyways. So Chamberlain going with his original strat into the pit lane, fresh set of fuel, fresh set of boots, and back out on track. And this is going to be one of the most important laps of his life. You're on cold tires, you have to tiptoe, but this lap has to be quick, and it needs to be pretty much near perfect if he wants to overtake Larson off track.
Remember, if you follow the WEC rules, for example, you're seeing that you can have simultaneous pit stops with the tires and refuels in the WEC side. And as mentioned, we have a lot of WEC tracks, so when you have MLU, you in theory might have that same rule set come through. We're seeing that through. But we'll see when the next cars peel on down. Larson, no signal of coming in yet. All while De La Fontaine, he's trying to find a way still around Richard, at least to get the spot back, I mean. Now we might see that strategy really come into play on the difference that we were talking about earlier on. They are in a very heavy bit of traffic too. It might be advantageous to come in.
Yeah, I think so, especially if you're De La Fontaine. I think you just come in and just really bite the bullet, I would say. It's not the best time to do it. I'm sure they wanted to wait a little bit longer, maybe one more lap, but I mean, what's one lap at this stage? Might work out as well with the undercut. We'll see if Richard, if he misses, or Ricard, if he misses his pit stop, or if he misses his box, that could potentially throw a monkey wrench into the equation. Here we see the Lamborghini getting off to the side here and allowing both drivers on through. It's always a terrifying experience, but it has to be done nonetheless. And I honestly suspect both these drivers to come into pit lane on this lap. It seems like it's just a bit of wasted time staying out, but let's see. It doesn't look like either one's posturing the pit lane. I think they're both going to stay out. My goodness.
Yeah, looks like they are going to stay out indeed, with Wolf giving it space here. So trying to extend. By the way, Larson is in. Larson is in the lane. So the leader has ducked on down. Now the question is, where will he cycle? Here is Chamberlain trying to go down the old pit straight. Larson, where will he cycle? 1.9, 1.8 on the interval. It's going to be close. Larson is in front. He actually built a small buffer with the pit stop.
So that goes to show you that Larson was not pushing his full extent. When he was being followed by Chamberlain, I do not think he was at full capability. I think on that final lap, he wrung the neck of the tires and just threw caution to the wind, went for everything he could, because look at the gap that he has. 1 second. They were bumper to bumper when Chamberlain went into pit lane. Now an entire second separating them, and that slipstream gone. That's a lot of work now for the Porsche to catch back up.
Yeah, that might take a few laps. You have to think of the tire difference there in terms of the cycle by putting on the tires might be the thing. So, it's going to be keeping an eye on that one for the time being. How much that closes. You mentioned not expecting tire wear to be a difference. The cold tires, though, are going to take a couple laps to get up to temp in theory, Mike.
Yeah, they are, but I don't know if Larson took tires or not. I feel with the gap that he has, he had to have taken tires with 1 second. I think it was just a much better outlap. If Larson didn't take tires, he would have been much further ahead, I think. So I don't think that's a variable. I could be wrong, but both of them, I think, should be on cold tires right now, and that's why we're really not seeing Chamberlain gain up. He did gain a little bit, to be fair. 0.3, 2 tenths, give or take. And counting, as if you go into a braking zone, it's a little bit more, but it might be overshot slightly. But Chamberlain's tires should come up to temp first. So this lap, this will be the real teller. If Chamberlain can get onto the back, then I think that shows that both of them definitely took tires, and Larson's just took a little bit more to get into temp. And then at the end of the day, there was no difference. And we're exactly as we were before we stopped.
Under 30 minutes on the clock, by the way. Under 30 minutes to go here in the season opener for Simu Nation LMGT3 Masters, powered by NOX Gaming here today. It's been an incredible race to start things off with some good battling a part of the field for those tuning in. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to follow along with the action. Remember, a part of this championship, a $250 NOX Gaming gift card in an official trophy to win a first place for the championship. And these two have set the tone so far. Porte still yet to come on down. Desamo to come down pretty soon as they extend the window. The interesting thing is going to be where they go here. Now, the big thing is, when's the attack point? When do you go to attack if you're the 93? When's the time you have to strike? Or when do you want to strike?
As late as possible, I think. The one difference, now this is where I'm going to have to rely on chat for my knowledge because, of course, I'm speaking from different simulators here. But typically in other simulators, the Porsche is not as fast as the Ferrari. The Ferrari is typically quicker in a straight line. So if the Porsche does get ahead, and what I'm saying is true, then I think it's going to be a much easier time for the Ferrari to get by with slipstream than the Porsche. Porsche's really going to have to line it up into a braking zone and kind of send it, so it might just be when the opportunity presents itself. We've seen that Chamberlain has made a couple opportunities for himself already. It hasn't quite paid off just yet, but it's just forcing Larson into some form of awkward situation, I think. He wants to do that sooner rather than later, but at the end of the day, 28 minutes left. You can wait.
Still a bit of time, absolutely. Especially with the difference, only 6/10. Now, for the time being, though, keep an eye on how much they chip away to the overall leaders. You're always seeing them gain a couple tenths alone as someone's just spot out. Once with Corvettes going around as they deal with Wolf, that's going to actually hold up Chamberlain a little bit and lose a couple tenths also. A little bit of craziness there with some of the lap traffic at the wrong time for your net leaders.
Yeah, I think that was that same Corvette that we saw on the infield having a little bit of a picnic earlier on, so a bad day at the office for them. The teal Corvette not quite getting off to the start they would like, and then Chamberlain nearly getting punted by the Lamborghini, but thankfully just enough room to get by and maybe testing the structural fortitude of his racing trousers, but the gap remains the same, about 0.6 of a second. So no harm, no foul. The back markers giveth and the back markers taketh away. A saying as old as time. So we're going to see some losses, we're going to see some gains. But at the end of the day, these two are probably going to be battling all the way to the line. And, might I add, I suspect this for the rest of the season as well.
Going to be your two favorites likely throughout this campaign. As we continue to zip on through, under 27 minutes to work with. Now, we'll say, touch upon some of the experience you mentioned. Larson, for example, is one of the drivers that actually races on the dirt side. One of the US-based drivers believe that is one who races in sprint cars on the dirt side. So a bit of a crossover effect, so to speak, that falls over to the road side that comes into there. You compare that to a couple of the others here in terms of the experience levels where they have more virtual. It's where a lot of these competitors try and build up that experience of get as much seat time as possible.
Yeah, that's the beauty of what the simulators these days allow you to do, and that's why we see, I touched on it just briefly earlier, that's why we see so many young drivers coming into these series as well and doing such a good time, is they just start at such a young age. Your older brother is a sim racer, then you get your younger brother into sim racing, and then you have another brother after that, and they start at the age of 3, and by the time they reach 10, now all of a sudden they have more seat time than most race car drivers have ever had in their life. And it's just down to practice. That's why we see the margins at the top level of both real-life racing and sim racing being so different. You look at real-life racing in a lot of the series, the times are separated by maybe a second in the top 100 throughout the top drivers. And then you go into sim racing and you look at the times and they're separated by less than a tenth of a second, less than 10 thousandths of a second at times throughout the top 100. It just goes to show you, like you said, Justin, seat time, it makes the difference. And the more practice that you put in, well, you've heard the saying, practice makes perfect. Turns out, it's true.
Definitely is helpful, I will say, for some of the drivers to give some of the air love to some of these competitors, though, while the leaders, the net leaders, continue to chip away. Hold on, yellow flags in the sector. Somebody, I think, is off. Will there be a pop-up here? I don't think anyone else is around. I think everything's stabled out. Now, was about to say, you also talked talk about the wide range with the driving experience, one of the other drivers I keep an eye on for potentially improvement throughout the season is Delay, for example. If we go towards him, because he's one of the drivers quietly believe in this running that has the karting experience, that have actually called in karting races on the Canadian side. It's just some of the crossover that comes over on that side. Compare that to, say, some of the others that have the pro side or attend races for the various series. It's interesting where this all sparks up in terms of those different marks you have in these types of races. Now, in all seriousness, to get back to the importance of the race, though, De La Fontaine is the only driver to not come in yet here, Mike. That's a long way on gas. They've been able to stretch it here, but the gap is only 3.9 seconds.
That is a great point. I have not considered that yet. De La Fontaine is just pushing to his heart's content right now. Richard, by the way, just coming in as well. So that's a potential variable to throw into the equation as well. But I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. They were on their own. They had their own little gap at the end of the day. So I think they're just pushing to push and running with the original strategy. So that's going to be what it is. But we are just going to take a quick little second here. So enjoy the audio sound here as we just have a slight little technical hiccup. And we are back, and hopefully that is all fixed, Justin. Back to seeing these cars out on track, the leaders at each other's throats, as this has been the trend from the beginning, and will be continuing to do so as well.
Yeah. As these drivers go on through. Right now, for those keeping it on track on the net top 5, Larson is getting pressurized. This is the move we've been waiting for. Chamberlain trying to make the move on the outside. Can he make it stick going up through left field? No. First strike. It ends up going Larson's way. Second strike. When does that come?
Could come in the next 5 seconds. It could come in the next 21 minutes, and it may never as well. That could have been the one opportunity that Chamberlain had. The iron was hot, but he couldn't quite capitalize. The steam, though, is going to be peeling out of the ears of Chamberlain and just going to be scratching his head now. When do I make my next move? How do I get it done? The weaknesses potentially starting to show here from Larson. Let's see. The game is on now, and the gap is back to half a second, but we've seen before Chamberlain can close it, and he'll do it again.
Yeah, this might take a couple moments here. How many opportunities do you think we get here? Because 21 minutes, lap times, give or take almost 2 minutes. What's the math say? About 10, 11 opportunities to do something?
Well, let's see how many that's going to be, because immediately we can add 1 to the tally. At least that was, I think, it was hard to tell from the angle. He was a little bit too far back. I think that was just him hitting the racing line and really trying to make the corners. Gain to the back. You got to be careful. You cannot run that wide in the Porsche. You go just a little bit wider, catch your tires on the outside curb, and you'll find yourself spinning around quicker than a quick thing in Quicksville. And the Porsche is going to absolutely punish you for that. The Ferrari, a little bit more graceful, a little bit more delicate, or more, I guess, less precise on the curbs. And ooh, aggressive apex from Chamberlain. I'd imagine Larson there, a little bit of a mistake.
A little bit of a slow up, and look at Larson. That's a big swerve. Trying to battle with the car, maybe try and block the lanes up. Doesn't get a run this time up the Wellington straight. A little bit of aggression. I don't think I've seen that aggressive of a cut back and forth, though, to break the arrow before.
No, this is definitely the time to strike. The game is now on, and we have officially started our medieval duel with baseball bats. Well, maybe not quite just yet, but the meat cleavers are going to be coming at some point as well. This is a little annoying for Larson, I'd imagine. I see in chat right now from Dale Rodman Jr. saying it's awesome to finally see Larson getting a little bit of pressure here. So Larson maybe a favorite in a lot of championships, and now Chamberlain here to put a wrench in the equation and say, no, you're not going to walk away with this championship that easy. Not if I have anything to say about it.
Yeah, you had to put up a strong fight to start things off, right? And we're seeing that right from the get-go with about 19 minutes to work with. This is now for the overall lead, by the way. LaFontaine had cycled down to 5th with the pit stops here. Leroy trying to close up. See how things pack up here with the traffic. Porsche on the charge, trying to keep up with Cotillier as lap traffic says, I'll just take the off track, no problem.
I want nothing to do with this battle, and I respect that tremendously. I'm in the same boat. Just get off track and get out of the way, but allow the two dogs to continue their dogfight. Right now, the 90 putting the pressure on the BMW. Again, we still have that battle for the lead continuing, and that, don't worry folks, that is not going anywhere anytime soon. It will be continuing, I'd imagine, until later on tonight after the checkered flag has settled. This is going to continue on into the Discord conversations. The drivers, of course, going to be egging each other on. This is, I think, a development of a rivalry here, Justin, that we're going to be seeing.
I would say an established one, potentially, in terms of the community side, but could for the lore of this side, absolutely. But now, as they continue to sort themselves, you just see, though, that again, the battle of the Porsche versus now the BMW here. The Porsche, always to me, has been good with the corner balance in terms of being able to maintain center roll. But the BMW, no, they put a lot of work on the virtual side to promote that car on multiple platforms, all the BMWs with the latest generations, to make sure that it was out there for the public to be able to get their hands on it, while also helping their own development for the real-world car by having the virtual side to use the test.
Yeah, it's a little above my pay grade in terms of gaining information, but it is incredible to see the realism trends that we have between real life, between simulations, and just the fact that the amount of data that you can gather in a time space. And again, Justin, that goes back to the conversation that we had earlier that you brought up of seat time. The fact is that you can get much more data in a shorter period of time when you have people that can drive as much as they possibly want. And on top of that, you can have more AI involvement as well, with self-driving cars, of course, not quite being up to spec, and BMW, to my knowledge, does not have a self-driving program, but I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. And oh my goodness, there's a little bit of backmarker kerfuffle going on right now, and that has lit a fire underneath the seat of Chamberlain. What do we see now? Is he going to go for it? Potentially. But I think the answer is yes, Justin. He's absolutely going full send at this stage and down to the inside of the village. Doesn't find the gap, but he's going to try to carry that momentum all the way home.
Will there be another chance up the Wellington Straight? Look at how tight it is, about a car length difference. Here comes Chamberlain on the deep send. Trying to force a mistake from Larson. Larson didn't even budge. Not even phased from the sends here for the 93 machine. And with the middle of the field they're catching up to here, a lot less opportunities to be able to go full lunge, depending on how some of these drivers handle the blue flags here. You better pick the right spots for where you reach traffic.
I'm going to be honest, as we go through this race, I favored Chamberlain earlier. I thought he would get the overtake, but barring, I think, a blue flag, I'm starting to favor Larson. He's showing that he's got ice in his veins. He is an untouchable stone, as you just said there. And I think, just like Icarus, Chamberlain might be flying a little too close to the sun here. He doesn't want to end up getting burnt. You really want to keep the second place, no matter what happens, even if it is, of course, first or second for Chamberlain and Larson. You don't want to find yourself getting into contact. You don't want to find yourself in the barrier and losing out on potential points and potentially a prize at the end of this championship. First place, of course, gaining $250 NOX Gaming gift cards prize. Second, $125 NOX Gaming. That's a double difference. You really want to find yourself up in P1. Third, gaining a pair of NOX Gaming racing gloves value of $90 as well. So there's a lot on the table for these drivers, and back markers like this make things very, very questionable.
Yes, indeed. Look at this as they approach the 737. And this sets up Chamberlain to try and peel to the inside yet again. Again to the door, again with the squeeze, a little bit of contact with Larson, side by side. Chamberlain gets the pull from the outside groove, up to entry. Up the Wellington straight they go. Clean space for Larson to use the straight line speed. This will be where the difference comes into play with the cars. Larson sends it, clears. 93 goes right back to second.
My goodness, a stellar defense here, and Larson, despite the fact that he has the absolute weight of the world on his shoulders, he holds strong, he holds fast, and Chamberlain doesn't get the overtake done. How? I have no idea. We're not done yet, though. The gap is still not 0.2 of a second. There is nothing between these two, and Larson using his tires, Chamberlain using his tires, and the time going to be in the favor right now, I think, of Chamberlain as he continues to keep biting and biting and biting at the heels of Larson.
Yeah, forces another reset, forces another chance for a pounce through. There's a bit of traffic yet again by a couple car lanes, but again, no expected issues there. The interesting part of this is keeping an eye on this and trying to make sure who's got this. The fastest lap is an error factor for points, by the way. It's going to be the question, who's going to be able to have that edge by the very end of the night also, because that's going to be an extra point here. If it's one of these two, it can be very helpful for the separation here. We'll keep an eye on that for you with 13 minutes to go. But Chamberlain is on the charge again. It's been interesting to see those dives, in particular, up in what is normally Sector 1 here. Normally, you don't see too many passing opportunities per se up to the village and the loop, unless you are very confident. And right now, you see with the braking, that Porsche is almost streaking to the back of the Ferrari on entry.
Well, this is a bit of deja vu, I think, for Larson. The back markers really playing a role here in the favor of Chamberlain and taking advantage of it nearly like we saw on the last lap. I don't think there's going to be as good of a run for Chamberlain on this occasion. The gap is longer, the slipstream is not as powerful, as there isn't a mistake from Larson. I do, by the way, have a replay of that saga if you do want that. For the little bit of contact that we had on the previous lap, of course. You can see here, this was the little bit of contact. I'd call it net code. I would even go as far as saying got a nice close angle here as we go into the braking. I think the 93 left enough room. The 150, though, does get tagged just a little bit, and you can see here how the 93 does not gain the ground, does not gain the position is beyond me. The Ferrari, as we cut off of it, the cars are, there we go. Back to the inside, the 93 there, just absolutely not able to overtake. Whoa. I don't know what's happening on the replay side of things, but LMU doing LMU.
Hashtag LMU things. 159 forced the fastest lap. Chamberlain is the one with that lap for that extra point, by the way, Mike.
Yes, indeed. Now just trying to keep that fastest lap, improving is what he needs to do. I don't know how he's going to get by Larson at this stage, but it's going to take an absolute Hail Mary pass. Throw it at the wall, see what sticks. There's 10 minutes left. We're getting down to the wire. It seems like just, well, I was going to say just 5 minutes ago we had 17, but it doesn't quite feel like that. It's absolutely flying by is what I'm getting at. The timer, not in the favor as much in Chamberlain anymore. I think Larson, he just has to keep this little bit of a gap. If he can keep it to a half second, he has nothing to worry about.
Especially with how much he's been able to send it into the corners. Look at this. He's able to gain up about a tenth every braking zone. Just about, even with the Porsche. He's able to get better rotation as a result with some of these cuts off corner exit. So this is, by the way, your closest battle on the racetrack for those curious. Your top 15, most of the drivers separated by more than a second. These two are ready to scrap it out for about maybe 5 more chances, maybe 6, with 10 minutes to go on the clock here for the season opener for Simu Nation's LMGT3 Masters, powered by NOX Gaming here today. Chamberlain builds up the run for the front straightaway for the old pit straight. Will there be a bold send? Not yet. Chess pieces being put into play, though.
Yeah, playing chess at about 200 miles an hour right now, and the question is, are you a pigeon playing chess, or are you a bit of a grandmaster? Right now, we're watching, I think, two grandmasters at work. This is absolutely incredible, the level of precision that's required to drive at this distance between each other for this amount of time. This has been a 75-minute race, folks, and these two have been separated by no more than a second for one lap. Granted, they had one lap where they weren't together, and that was because they pit on separate laps. That was the only time that we didn't see the two in the same frame, in the same shot. And I don't think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to change throughout this championship. As we get ready to head on over to Monza, I think this is going to be the trend through and through. Now, Monza, of course, I guess we can start to begin that conversation here, Justin, as we get the predictions headed on. It's not too dissimilar of a track of Silverstone. It's got a couple more high-speed braking zones and maybe a couple more overtaking opportunities, but it is an old track. It's an old F1 track. It's got a lot of history, just like the circuit we see here today.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting bit, as there's the well-known Corvette that's been all over the racetrack here today. And to keep it out of the way this time with the blue flags. Traffic, I will say, extremely respectful today, Mike. So everything's been going really well in terms of that side. It hasn't been as simple as time as a lap car to park it. No, people are respecting the blue flags, as you would expect here for a race today.
I think part of that comes down to as well the track selection. You know, this is a circuit that just has plenty of space. You know, you have a lot of room to move out of the way. If you really want, you can get off the track. Most of the time, you don't need to. What is going to interest me is when we get over to the GOAT track, known as, of course, Sebring. That's a circuit that maybe doesn't have as many lapping opportunities, as many overtaking chances as the circuits that we have leading up to that. Paul Ricard being quite a wide circuit, Monza being quite a wide circuit. So I think blue flags should be fairly tame in those ones. But once we get to Sebring, followed up by Imola, that is an absolute corker. And then, of course, Coda being after that. But there are some overtaking opportunities there, but they're few and far between. This is a very interesting calendar that we have, and it really promotes good racing, I would say.
Yep, it absolutely does. And we've seen it going really well. By the way, P8 and P9 is closing up a little bit on the racetrack for those on the air battle side. Leroy, we've talked about him a fair bit tonight. He's actually been able to reel in with some of the traffic, Cotillier, by a couple tenths here. See right now, Wolf just in front of him, in fact, in the BMW, but Leroy is taking a good opportunity to pinch away this gap. Although, he just had a not so good run through Sector 1 there. He just did not get as much speed to the loop as he was hoping for.
A little bit of focusing on the prize ahead rather than focusing on the road ahead. You got to keep an eye on the tarmac. Both eyes on the tarmac. And yes, of course, you want to watch the fun battle that is up ahead of you, but worry about the road in front. Still 1.2 seconds into the gap, so it's not going to be insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. I see the other gaps that are closing down, Ward and Aschenbrenner as well. They're going to be coming together potentially here fairly soon. So some prospects on the line. We see these battle packs kind of forming as well, the different times. De La Fonte, 20 seconds off the back of P4. Then we have, of course, other ones. Hamel, 33 seconds. Whoa! Was that a little bit of contact? Careful there, Aschenbrenner, as he got a little too close. As I mentioned earlier, Icarus flying close to the sun. That was very much too close, and that's from the McLaren behind, actually.
Yeah, a little bit darty there for one of the drivers with a lot of experience on the platform, but we'll give him credit. I believe was one of the drivers in the 20s when we started this one off today. Has actually, with the strategy, worked out really well into the 14th spot, into a decent battle. Here comes Ward, though, looking to try and get the run. Ward with the squeeze. Ward with the pass.
Textbook overtake there, and Aschenbrenner left with his jaw firmly planted on the floor. Not much he could have done about that one. Cover it a bit more aggressively would have been contact. So, at the end of that, nicely done. Getting down though, 5 minutes left to go for and change. So now what's going to be the prospect for Chamberlain? He's been prospecting all race, and so far he's only come up with a silver. The gold though is within touching distance.
Will there be a chance again? I think everyone's waiting for that opportunity once more. It's been gained every time in here, Sector 1. It's been the best area all day long for the Porsche. How about a bit of bumper cars? Larson hit from behind, still holds on to it. That actually gave him a boost.
Carrying the momentum onto the back straight now. Chamberlain also getting checked up, so that's not going to help him by any stretch. Down to the braking zone. Couple more laps to go. Probably just 2 left here at this stage. As we get to the line, it's going to be tight. It's going to be close, but this Porsche has a lot of work to do. He's come up bridesmaid on every single conversation thus far. Can he insert himself into the top step? Larson showing utter perfection, I would go as far as saying. He hasn't really made a mistake at all this entire race. The only driver that has, well, Chamberlain making some slight little errors here and there, but the top 2 have been near pixel perfect, and it's going to carry all the way down here as we get to the penultimate lap. Chamberlain biding his time, keeping in the slipstream. Now is the time to gain up, get it nice and close in Stowe, and maybe make the move into Village and Abbey. He's been very confident and very consistent into those 2 corners and made multiple looks. Is this the time? Is this the lap?
I think right now, a little bit distance. Cotillia has also lost ground, falling back to 9th, by the way, as we looked away from the leaders. Leroy did take the spot away. BMW wasn't able to hold on. Still a decent effort today, but the 31 machine going to have to try and get back in the binders as one of the lappers did lose it. I think that might have been Wolf that spun it around. It looks like they're able to get back going as the rest of the field zips through. Final 2 minutes and 30 seconds. We're just about to the mark, Mike.
Chamberlain's ahead of Larson. Chamberlain is ahead of Larson. What has just happened? We're absolutely going to have to pull up a replay of that. That has just happened.
All of a sudden, too, because it went from a couple tenths up to 7 tenths difference. Chamberlain is now with the race lead, coming up to what may be the final few minutes here. Coming up to 2 minutes to go, Mike.
Yes, indeed. And again, working on pulling that up here as soon as possible. I'm sensing there was a mistake. I mean, there absolutely had to be from that much of a gap to be formed. Larson, I mentioned pixel perfect up to this point, and it seems like he has fallen.
Down to 1:50 up on the board as they come their way on through some of the traffic. Chamberlain trying to hold on now is up by a second. Larson is falling and plummeting in terms of his interval. He's not closing. He is losing lots of ground on the Ferrari. Something obviously spiraling after controlling this race for all but what is now the final 2 minutes. The Porsche looks to pull away. Chamberlain looking to try and secure things with 1:20 to go, but still has to get through one more lap car and the rest of the pack.
Yes, he does. A long, long ways here still for the spell, and unfortunately, I'm hoping I can pull my replays. I'm having a little bit of issues. So we'll find that here very shortly, but as we continue on here, the prospect for 8th, the prospect for 9th is still in question as Courtier and Leroy are at each other's throats, but can Larson catch up here? I don't know. That's such a big gap to be formed in such a short time, and I think I might have found it here. So just give me 2 seconds.
Well, as those 2 seconds go on, Larson is losing 2 tenths right now with traffic. Can't pass traffic, in fact. Larson is plummeting even more. Now it's 1.5, 1.6. Does this have anything to do maybe with the virtual energy side of things, where if you're close to the end, do you start backing off, Mike?
It very well could be. Actually, the difference between Larson and Chamberlain is about 3%. So that in favor of Chamberlain. Chamberlain was at 9 during that incident. So here, I'll pull that up very shortly. But I do have that replay of the incident with Larson. And unfortunately, it's not the most exciting replay to watch, but we will here be taking a quick little look at it. It's going to be a mistake of mistakes potentially for what is going to be the previous champion. You can see 1.5 seconds already formed for the gap here. Just
here we go.
Wait. Oh,
Chamberlain coming across the line, looking to close things out. Zeros on the clock. Chamberlain comes across and has the advantage, is able to get a chance to pull through. 3 seconds on the margin at the end, and it's Chamberlain holding on. Larson right now second on the racetrack. What a finish, and what a dramatic end for the opening round of the season, as they will close it out. Laportier will immediately go to burnouts for the top 3.
And that is a respectable finish. What's for dinner? It's donuts. Yes, indeed. Laportier, a lovely finish, and managed to run P3 the entirety of this session. So a great little run. Also, again, that incident for Larson, we can pull that up, Sagar, if you want here real quick, and take a look at what happened, what led to Larson's demise. And this is going to be it right here. It's going to be Larson heading on to the backstretch. This is going to be the Lewis Hamilton straight that we're on right now. Through the right-hander, catches the inside curb, and off the track goes Larson. Through goes Chamberlain into the lead of this race.
That explains why it's so sudden too, Mike. Just one mistake the entire race, and it comes at the worst possible time.
And on top of that, it was confirmed Larson absolutely did run low on virtual energy compared to Chamberlain. Chamberlain finished on about 5%. It was about 1% for Larson. So really, really cutting it close and having to do some extra little saving at the end. Very unfortunate. I think no matter what, I think Chamberlain would have had it. With that virtual energy mistake from Larson, I think that there was absolutely no chance. It was just a matter of time, and Chamberlain played his cards perfectly. It fell into his hand at the end of the race. He forced Larson, the boogeyman, it seems from chat, into a mistake, and now, folks, we have a new boogeyman amongst us.
See the last of the drivers coming across through on their celebrations and on their closing laps. Most of the field, in fact all, I believe has now crossed the stripe here, except for maybe one. So, for the most part, clean sailing all throughout the day, Mike. At the end, Chamberlain just able to take advantage. You also throw others like Desert Mo, who was able to hold on to fourth here in the conversation also. So overall, some intense battling today, Mike.
It certainly was, and throughout the entirety of this field as well. We're not even touching on the mid-pack battles, the Wards, the Parrots, the Parades, the Gore-Tex as well, the Longos, who managed to claw their way through the field. I don't know if we can bring up the positions gained at this point just to see how many some of these drivers managed to make it through, and there weren't really too many incidents either. Throughout this entire race, there we can see some big gainers through Aschenbetter, I think up 11 positions as well, so seeing massive, massive prospects, and we'll have the results here very, very shortly.
Absolutely here. So an incredible race once again to start off the season that comes down to one mistake, possibly two when you factor in the energy store. And in the end, it comes down to who's able to keep it on the racetrack at the closing stages of this one, Mike. So it lived up to the billing and set the tone, I think, for a good race to start things off for the community as we wait for drivers to populate and as well get ready to look towards the results pretty soon here. So what stood out to you the most here as we get ready to look towards that way soon?
I would say the top two little battle that we have going on here, the rivalry of rivalries between the two alphas at the top. And, you know, on top of that, I just want to briefly mention before we kind of get into this conversation here, for those fine folks at home, if you are looking to get yourself involved into this, why wouldn't you? First off, the signups are still available. You can head on down to the link in the description. You can join the Discord, mention or message the admins as well. I think there's also a qualifying, so maybe don't quote me on that, but you can find yourself getting involved in the community here at Simu Nation. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, and you can find more events just like this. But Justin, to answer your question, yeah, I really do think that the battle between Larson and Chamberlain was the highlight. De La Fonte also another driver that I expected a little more out of. Didn't quite get the results that were expected, but seeing some big gains as well. Paré we saw. Who else? Gooden, I think Gooden did not have that good of a race. My apologies. Leroy, one of the fan favorites as well, managing to claw their way through. There's so many good moments in this one, Justin. I'm curious what you have to highlight.
I think, again, I've really liked what I see with the race lead, but also some good battling for Leroy in terms of his fight on the racetrack. So we had a lot of good scraps here today in those sequences here for this one. Some good eventful battling here today, we'll say, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great setup for the rest of this championship. Like I said, Monza being up next is absolutely crazy. We all know the stories, the horror stories, the good stories, all of the ugly and the good and the bad that happens at that wonderful, wonderful circuit, the Autodromo Internazionale de Monza. No, it's just Nacional. It's not international. But either way, it's a great track, and that is going to be coming up on January 27th. You do not want to miss it. After that, we head over to Paul Ricard for the next track, another absolute corker. We're going to be seeing the chicaneless variant. I actually haven't driven Paul Ricard in this sim yet. It's one of the newer tracks. Does it have the chicane in this version? No, right?
Well, that's a good question in that, well, in terms of my experience at least, I know it has the track with a bunch of lines on it. That's my experience. That's what I can tell you. It has a lot of blue lines on it.
It does have a lot of blue lines. Those different lines as well are different. The colors represent different amounts of aggregate. So the red lines are the very, very abrasive ones. The blue ones are a little bit less abrasive. I might have that flipped around. And the white ones are also the least abrasive ones. So as you go wide on the track, it's almost like more sandpaper to keep you from running wide. But as I said earlier, there's 267 plus layouts at that track. So yeah, there's a lot of lines.
Yes, absolutely. I know in our platforms that became a meme of sorts in the layouts, but at this point, an eventful time, to say the very least, here at Silverstone. I know we have drivers getting ready to queue on up pretty soon, Mike. I know some of the drivers like Christopher Larson going to be very happy with the run until the last part at least. Let's talk with Christopher Larson as he jumps on in here, second spot here in the race today. Christopher, what happened with that bobble that lost you the race?
Oh, well, I had a little bit of suspension damage from about halfway, and it was just fighting it, but the car twitched there every lap, and I caught it every lap except for one, so it's just Ferrari things to make it turn, and it got me one time.
Well, that answers the question on why there was some of the twitchiness in some of the straightaways too, but as well, what was the energy store like in terms of that? You were at 1%.
Yeah, I was cutting it close. I probably could have taken 1% out. I was at 1.1 when I finished, so a little bit of fuel saving at the start helped a lot for the pit stop.
Yeah, so at this point with the championship, how would you describe the battles you expect with Chamberlain, especially with what you've had in different leagues throughout your time here?
Oh, that's just the start of it. It's going to be that the whole way through the season, and like I said to him, it's going to be elbows out, but it's going to be clean and fun, and whoever wins is the one that deserved to win.
So on that note, anyone who want to give a shout out to for your second place run to start the season?
I mean, everyone that put this on, everyone doing broadcast, and mainly to Chamberlain, because there's not many people that I could trust to fight like that, and not us both end up dead really, really fast. So here's to a good season.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Christopher. Congratulations on the second place run here today.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Christopher Larson giving some good insight. Suspension damage. That had to come from the early contact, didn't it?
It must have. I was wondering the same thing myself. Yeah, it must have come from the early contact, and I'm surprised that it didn't rear its head up in such an ugly animal and throw him around. This goes to show you the caliber of driver that we have here up at the top, or caliber of drivers up at the top. Larson there trying to deal with a twitchy, a wounded horse, you might say. And with that, still managing to lap in the 58s every single time. I don't know how that's possible. Certainly not with me behind the wheel, but hey, built different is what I like to say.
So as we get ready to close things on up here, again, Chamberlain getting the first place spot, Larson in second, Laporte in the top three spots here today. One more mention. The next track, again, is going to be Monza. Monza going to be a wild one, especially with the amount of slipstream we expect.
Yeah, it certainly will be. It's going to be a chaotic, long race for some. It's going to be a very exciting one for others, as we saw, setting us up quite wonderfully for Monza. I think it's going to be an absolute corker.
Yep, so let's take the opportunity to once again thank the race sponsors, by the way, for today. Again, you have to thank Wolf Sim Racing amongst their support for this series. We've seen them earlier with the track maps. Of course, you have to give a shout out to NOX Gaming and their support as one of the prize sponsors for this season for the top 3 podium runners. And of course, got to shout out Simu Nation for their organization of running this event and these events throughout this campaign. But as we get ready to say goodbye, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in for today's action here for Simu Nation action here on V-Speed. For our producer, once again, in the booth, in Sagur Bakshi, with my co-announcer, Mike Noss, I'm Justin Prince, saying so long. Enjoy the rest of your evening. You've been watching today's action from Silverstone. Congratulations to Chamberlain. He gets the win at Silverstone.